update on Bitcoin. Hey, quick update on Bitcoin and where I see things headed in the short to medium term now that we've actually got some clarity on where kind of price is going. So this is basically how I'm reading it. I said to you in the last video I would consider anything prices going down here without any lower closes on a higher time frame below this to be a bear trap, and I would still see the most likely scenario as a rebound from this move here, because this move initially from the 30k to like 40k, I wouldn't really consider that any kind of retracement of this. This is just obviously ended up forming some kind of like basing consolidation pattern to move higher, and I said that the risk was far or was more likely to the upside, and I think that we've now got that move. Okay, so we've now moved off the recent lows in and around basically 63%, which is a pretty sizable move, and a bit more like crypto and BTC. And now this is how I'm reading it. So I'm actually reading this as a potential counter move to the 30k, 29k lows, and I think this can potentially be quite a bull trap, because I was actually waiting, you see in my previous videos as well, for basically somewhere between 47 and 50k as really the push up and the move before we can at least get some sort of correction. Okay, so this is how I'd be reading it. For me, I see we're basically coming up to a heavy area of resistance, because one, we've broken this trend line. We've broken the trend line, which is bullish, but I would be very cautious here, because basically we're moving into an area of supply. So we're basically at the area of where we actually capitulated on like May the 17th. So you've got to be very wary of that. We haven't had any sort of pullback, not that we necessarily need to, but if you look at Bitcoin at the RSI, we're looking a little bit, at least overheated a little bit on the short term on some of these indicators, and we're looking a little bit wedgy. Okay, I'm seeing this as some kind of wedge like this. Any breakdown of this, for me, takes us minimum down to at least the bottom here. Okay, which would be some kind of 10-15% drop from the high. So I'd be watching this. I wouldn't be buying this breakout. Potentially a retest, maybe, but certainly wouldn't be buying now. Risk off. Risk is off for me. Fib extension, we're nearly at the 1-to-1. Okay, so the way I'm reading that is something like this. So we're at the 786. So we're at a fib level where we could see at least some pausing in price action. The actual 1-to-1 is exactly at 50k, which would maybe close out the CME's gap, which is another thing. Okay, so gaps don't have to get filled. Okay, I would probably be happy to consider this pretty much filled. Okay, we're pretty much there. And if you look at this on the higher time frame, you can barely sort of discern any difference from where the gap is. But yeah, I'd be looking at this as an area to potentially pause back down. We may be looking at something down below. Potentially we can get down below, down to these regions of sort of like in the 30s again. For me, any test coming back down into these levels is very bearish and is an indication that this sort of area wants to break, and maybe we can get a move below into the mid 20s or somewhere into the 20k BTCs. But we're not there yet. We're looking okay, but I would be cautious here. And if you look at some of the other altcoins and the way that they've moved, they've obviously, BTC kind of made its move, and you've got some coins like Cardano, even Ethereum. Their moves have actually come slightly later. Okay, and if you look at coins like Cardano, I'm very bullish on these projects and I'm in them for the long term. Certainly wouldn't be buying it. You've basically got like you're buying an RSI daily of like 90, which is actually pretty much the highest it has ever been, or it's been there before. So I'd be really cautious about buying anything up towards these highs, and I still think potentially that we can actually get breaks or at least test down to these lower levels on a lot of these coins, and I think their sort of secondary moves have actually been made. You look again at Link, right? We haven't had any pullback at all, and some of these coins, bear in mind, they've moved 120, 130%. So anyone who was sort of fairly bearish down here got in, or even the people who've been holding it up here, they may be tempted to sell because they're either back at break even if they try to catch some falling knives, or they're up a reasonable amount of money, percentage terms, in a short period of time. So I would expect for sure, at least this week, to either go sideways or maybe potentially sort of correct down and see where we go from there. For me, I do see this as some sort of counter wave. Maybe we move somewhere from here, at least down to maybe the top of this trend line, and maybe retest it, potentially somewhere in these regions. If we start getting closes down here again and we start forming some weird consolidation patterns, I would be looking at this as a potential area to break, because the more times we test a resistance, more times we test a support, I think the more times it's likely to break. And crypto is no different to any other market. So you look at this area when this one broke back in 2018. Flip side, exactly here, 2019, but exactly the opposite. So resistance kept on getting tested, moved up. But yeah, that's basically how I'm reading that. So I'd be pretty cautious here. I think, remember, down here it's hard to even see, where's 45, 50k coming from. And then, a few weeks later we're up here. And then on the flip side, I think you should also be aware that, it's not just going to be straight up. I don't think it's necessarily that easy. And I think we can actually go sideways, maybe consolidate a little bit more. But maybe, if we get some higher time frames up towards like 50Ks, then, that's pretty bullish. But this move looks like it's maybe, at least for the short term, running out of steam a little bit. But we'll see. So if we can get some maybe a nice retest off the trend line, I'll be looking at that as okay. That's maybe some confirmation of where we're at. And if you look at the EMAs that I like to use on the weeklies, okay, I believe, I'm not sure I can actually get it up here. 21 week EMA, where we are above these, but I'd be looking at some sort of move, at least back down to here, where we kind of maybe test this region. But yeah, for the time being, obviously, price remain bullish. We've had 4 weeks of complete green, so just sort of bear these things in mind, okay? Because the longer something sort of stays green or sort of stays red, usually the opposite starts to happen. So just be aware of that. For me, bang in no man's land. From here, in some of my positions, I've actually gone or hedged short for the time being until I get some kind of clarity. So I've got this move that I wanted off here, which is great. Lucky enough to have got that, and then we've broken this trend line. But I really would be wary about just any kind of bear traps in these regions. So yeah, so that's basically how I'd be reading it. Short time frames, certainly a little overextended. If you look at the 4 or the 12 hour on the weekends and the dailies even, and then higher time frames. Yeah, we need some closes in these higher regions, so we'll have to see. But essentially, we're moving from one area of supply and demand. So this will be the demand zone. This will be the supply zone for this sort of area. We're gonna have to see if we can kind of hold this, okay, and actually close some higher time frames up in the 50s, and then that might give us an indication that we can start to potentially move higher and test these highs and see how we go. But never say never with Bitcoin, but that's how I'd be reading it. Potentially at least some sort of correction for this large 65% move, maybe at least this week, and maybe into next, and we'll have to see whether that correction for me would take us any further, back down into the 30s, or start to retest these lows. Anything above any closes into the sort of 50s, and that might give us an indication that we're basically ready to push a little bit higher. So that's how I'd be reading it. Same thing for the altcoins. Nothing's changed. I would be still very happy to just hold Bitcoin, because again, I think volatility to the downside, you want to be holding BTC. Volatility to the upside, I still believe BTC is the leader and is the king, and especially in these times of slight uncertainty, I'll be holding out for the long term for the majority of my portfolio until I see another position and time to jump into the altcoins. But for me, that wouldn't be yet. So yeah, we'll see how this goes maybe towards the end of the week. Let's see if we can get maybe some pushes down towards the 40Ks. That's pretty much it. Catch you in the next one.